The wide receiver class in the 2024 NFL Draft is so stacked with talent that the Chiefs could end up snagging their wide receiver one of the future without having to give up an ungodly amount of draft capital. And in this video, I'll break down the top 5 wideouts the Chiefs could target in round 1, even exploring the realistic possibility they could trade up for an absolutely fantastic option if the board falls the right way. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? All right, the first receiver to get to on the list is Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. He will most likely be a true #1 receiver in the NFL and is often slated as wide receiver 4 of the entire draft class, really the only guy out of those 4 within reach for the Chiefs if he falls. He's often getting mocked around 12, 15, just somewhere in the teens, so I'm not sure if Kansas City tries to trade that far up to go and get Brian Thomas Jr. However, if he fell into the later teens bordering on pick 20, pick 21, for whatever reason, if he fell that far, KC could try to make that move up to lock in a potential wide receiver 1 for years to come. I mean, they traded up to what, 21? 22, somewhere around there for Trent McDuffie a couple years ago. So that is definitely within striking distance. And I like the idea of Brian Thomas Jr. a lot because Travis Kelce is not getting any younger and will not be around forever. The Chiefs have been able to get by after trading Tyreek Hill away, but they've had to lean very heavily on Kelce in order to get the job done. And while a team like the Buffalo Bills may be willing to be even more aggressive to make a push for Brian Thomas Jr. after trading away Stephon Diggs to the Texans, I listed him on this list because it is at least remotely possible for the Chiefs to be able to get him. The other 3 receivers, MHJ, Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors, will not make it out of the top 10. Unrealistic, Chiefs are not going to get there. But it's because of those 3 that Brian Thomas Jr. could still be available in the later teens and within striking distance for KC. He's got great speed, ran a 4.33 40, especially considering his size at 6'3" and 210 pounds. He has the ability to impact the game on all 3 levels, boasting great ball tracking skills down the field. This is really what he's great at, while being able to maintain his quickness while tracking the ball. Over 25 of his catches, for example, last season traveled 15 or more yards, and he also caught 15 of 22 passes on over 20 air yards. This is how good he is at getting downfield and tracking the ball. He has no problem as well going up to get the ball and has some impressive contested catches on his resume. I will say though, he's gathered mixed reviews on his yards after the catch ability. Some say they see flashes that should only improve over time. Others though are a bit more hesitant to say he'll grow in that area once hitting the NFL. Either way, teams will love him as a deep threat due to both his quickness off the line and his overall top speed. Thomas Jr. averaged 17.3 yards per catch and scored 17 touchdowns last season, which is pretty good. The crazy part to me about him is he hasn't even peaked yet, considering he didn't even start playing football until his sophomore year of high school. He's definitely improved as a route runner this past season and is still working to expand his route tree, and with a little more time to grow, he's going to be dangerous. You can tell he's working to get better too because his drop rate has decreased every single year. His quick acceleration makes it tough to press him at the line due to how agile he is around contact, and the Chiefs could have a lot of fun with him in this offense, especially considering the fact that Mahomes has a rocket launcher for an arm and they could take full advantage of his 4.33 speed. And while I'm really not sure the Chiefs will be able to snag Brian Thomas Jr. or not, the Rashee Rice situation could play a role in them being a bit more aggressive here, but even without the potential suspension looming, KC could still be willing to go up and get Brian Thomas Jr. if he falls far enough because he is that good. Now, the next 4 receivers I want to look at, the Chiefs could potentially land at pick 32 without having to trade up at all, or maybe trade up very slightly. Then after that, I'll share which receiver I would personally prefer. But before I get to that, this offseason, I've dedicated time to working on my physical health to be the best I can be for my family and all of you as I continue making the best content possible. I've been going on early morning walks, doing workouts to strengthen my weak knee and back, and trying to eat right because I found out my body has been storing up excess iron due to being a carrier of hemochromatosis. This helps spawn some of these changes, and that's why the sponsor of today's video video, Nourish has been a good place for me to get some solid advice around my diet. Nourish is the easiest way to find a registered dietitian online to improve your health through sustainable behavior change, and I know what some of you may be thinking, a dietitian for what? Well, maybe you're dealing with issues like me, or maybe it's weight management, eating disorders, gut health, diabetes, something autoimmune related, among other things. Whatever it is, Nourish has hundreds of dietitians specializing in a variety of health concerns. Signing up for Nourish was pretty simple via their easy-to-navigate website, and they accept hundreds of insurance plans in all 50 states, with 94% of Nourish patients paying $0 out of pocket. My insurance has approved my visits that have all been online at a time convenient for me, and my dietitian Taylor has been very helpful so far. There's no fad diets or weird restrictions. She just offers knowledge and advice in a way that I understand to help keep me accountable to my goals. It's been a great experience for me so far and could very well be the same for you. So to get signed up with your own dietitian to get help building meal plans, learn more about nutrition, or set long-term sustainable goals, make sure to head over to usenourish.com/chiefs to book an appointment today. After all, we only have one life to live, so we've got to spend it making the most educated choices we can. All right, much like Brian Thomas Jr., I'm not really sure if this next receiver will be available or not at pick 32, and that is Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. I still think if the Bills don't move up for Brian Thomas Jr., this could be their next pickup. However, plenty of mock drafts have the Chiefs somehow being able to take Mitchell at pick 32, which would be an incredible get without having to move up at all. Realistically, in my opinion, the Chiefs may have to jump the Bills to get Mitchell in the low to mid 20s, but crazier things have happened. Anyway, Adonai Mitchell is an explosive receiver, displaying great body control and is quick for his 6'2", 200-pound frame, running a 4.34 40. Then when throws are his way on target, his catch percentage is 96%, which is 8th in all of college football. That's pretty freaking crazy. He seemed to be a pretty rounded receiver by most that isn't necessarily elite at one particular thing, though some would say his hands are elite. He's had one drop in the last 2 seasons per PFF. I mean, that's pretty freaking good. Now, he is above average at a lot of things outside of the hands, showing good size, good speed, a decent route runner, which is ultimately a win for a first-round pick. However, he's not a big yak guy, averaging only 3.2 yards after the catch this past season. He only caught 4 contested catches in 2023 as well, and isn't the strongest wide receiver through contact. One of his biggest knocks is his inconsistency. He had 3 or fewer catches in 10 or so games last season, which is a bit of an eyebrow raiser, but all in all, I still think he's good enough to go in the first round. Ideally, he enters a situation where he doesn't have to be the immediate #1 guy. That's why he could be a good fit here in KC, where you already have pass catchers like Travis Kelce, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice. Next up is wide receiver Xavier Worthy, the 5'11", 170-ish pound receiver. He was heavier during the season, but slimmed down to around 165 pounds for the combine, probably to run this very, very fast combine record 40. He clocked a lightning time of 4.21, a new record. So yeah, this man is fast as hell. You can see it on film, but the speed doesn't necessarily translate to a lot of big plays down the field. Only 18% of his catches resulted in a 20-plus yard play. Meanwhile, Malik Neighbors was at 39% on catches over 20 yards. Worthy was actually targeted behind the line of scrimmage nearly 40% of his 75 receptions last year. That's quite a bit, but just shows how talented he is with the ball in his hands, whether it's behind the line of scrimmage or not. And honestly, Worthy's 40 time alone could very well earn him a first-round selection, even though many have him more of a second-round selection due to concerns about his lanky frame. He can struggle with getting jammed at the line of scrimmage and goes down often upon first contact. Also worth noting is the last season at Texas, he had just a 23% contested catch rate. That's a bit rough, but a deep ball is certainly harder to snag for what it's worth. It's not all bad for Worthy, though. He's got room to grow and improve. He's only 20 years old, has stayed pretty much healthy throughout his college career, is very dangerous with the ball in his hands, and you can't yet rule out the Chiefs taking somebody like Worthy at pick 32 because unless they trade up into the second round, Worthy will quite possibly not be there at pick 64. The question is, does Brett Veach and company find enough value in his speed to bring him in? I'd say it's at least worth considering Marquise Brown is only here on a 1-year deal, and you know how fun Andy Reid would have scheming somebody like Worthy open that is that fast. Now, the next guy frequently mocked to the Chiefs isn't as fast or is healthy on average compared to Worthy, but is definitely the superior route runner, a route technician, if you will, and that is the Irishman out of Georgia, Lad McConkey. He's coming off some injuries in 2023, which is why the dip in overall production and why he only played in 9 games, but is looking healthy from what I understand for his rookie year in the NFL. He's 6 foot tall, 186 pounds, and ran a 4.3940, which isn't Xavier Worthy fast, but it's still pretty freaking quick. He's fast off the line as well, showing real acceleration after his initial first step and can quickly reach top speed in his routes if needed, or tempo his route accordingly based on the coverage. He knows how to get open in man or zone, keeps opposing DBs honest due to his route running abilities, and is arguably one of the best route runners in this draft class. In fact, he's so good at it that McConkey could even be a top route runner in the NFL his rookie year, if it all translates. You can play him both inside and outside, and Lad is a decent vertical guy despite being a bit undersized. He's also got smaller hands and therefore a smaller catch radius, but didn't have a high drop rate that brings forth any big concerns. I believe his drop rate last year was 6.3%, with the median drop rate around 5.6. With all that being said, McConkey is a QB-friendly target that gets open, and although he has some injury concerns, he'd be a quality number 2 option for the right NFL offense, and when you combine that with his high football IQ, it's no wonder many think McConkey is an end of the first or early second round pick. Question is, will the Chiefs find he's the right guy for their system on their draft board? Well, I certainly think he could potentially be on there, and Lad would be a nice complement to Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. Now, after these 4 receivers, I think the next guy on the list that the Chiefs could most likely draft at the end of round 1, pick 32, is going to be wide receiver Keon Coleman. The former basketball player is a 6'3", 213-pound, dominant 50-50 pass catcher that uses his past basketball experience to make leaping acrobatic catches look almost normal. He's also a very unique receiver due to the fact he ran just a 4.6140 at the combine, yet has good burst and has shown good short area quickness. So he's not going to burn you and struggles with creating separation on his routes at times, but he can routinely come down with 50-50 balls that are just flat out impressive due to his consistent hands. He's very confident in those hands as well, and for good reason. He only has 5 drops in his college career on 184 targets, which is very nice. He can also be a pretty dominant blocker when needed and led the team in receiving yards at 2 different schools. In 2022, he had 58 snags for nearly 800 yards and 7 touchdowns with Michigan State. And then in 2023, he had 50 catches for 658 yards and 11 scores at Florida State. So an intriguing guy indeed, but there are some facets of his game that needs to improve. He struggled with his catch percentage on deep balls, only snagging 10 of 30 contested catches, had a pretty low success rate per target, as well as a low average of yards per route run due to the fact that the Seminoles wanted to keep throwing this man screen passes. They threw like 20 of them to him, though for what it's worth, he did manage to average 6.4 yards after the catch on those screen passes, which isn't bad. Something else that stands out about Keon is he can be used as a punt returner. He returned 25 punts last year at Florida State, averaging 12 yards a return. Overall, he's got traits and skills that can continue to be sharpened to allow him to become a difference maker in the right situation. And it's also worth mentioning that 40 times aren't always everything, and game speed during routes ran and all that can be something completely different. For example, Michael Pittman is a similar size and ran a 4.5240, so you can find success in the NFL regardless of overall top speed. DeAndre Hopkins ran a 4.57, Juju Smith-Schuster ran a 4.54, and the list goes on. And I'm not comparing Coleman to any of those guys per se, but 40 speed isn't always the most important thing to look at for a receiver, and Juju Smith-Schuster just recently had a borderline 1,000-yard season with the Chiefs a couple seasons ago. Now, Keon has drawn mixed reviews to be taken in round 1, with many listing him as a second rounder. However, with the Chiefs picking at the end of round 2, pick 64, they'd possibly have to trade up to get Coleman in round 2 if they don't take a receiver in round 1. Because you don't know how long he's going to last. He's definitely worth considering because Coleman is an intriguing, bigger-bodied guy that gives KC a type of receiver they don't currently have on the roster, isn't afraid to get out there and be physical in his blocks, and again, could be used as a punt returner in a pinch, or maybe he could even be the starter. However, I do list him last on here because I'm not sure he's the best scheme fit for the team, especially when compared to the other 4 receivers that I mentioned prior. But with all that being said, if I had my choice, I'd of course love Brian Thomas Jr. of everyone in this group due to him being a legitimate deep ball threat that can track the ball properly, something KC desperately needed last year. On top of that, he can still expand his route tree and be used more than just as a deep threat. Now, if the Chiefs stay tight at pick 32, I would not be mad if they were able to get Adonai Mitchell or Lad McConkey. Worthy is an intriguing guy as well because of his speed, and if that's what Veach opts for, speed over everything, then I'm fine with that because the Chiefs have shown they can make it work in their offense time and time again with these smaller, speedy receivers. In my next draft video, we will cover the receivers KC could be likely to take in rounds 2 or 3 because this wide receiver class is so deep that the Chiefs can still get a very talented wideout later if they opt to fill another position of need at the end of round 1, such as an offensive tackle, cornerback, or even an interior offensive or defensive lineman. And with all that being said, let me know who you'd like to see the Chiefs draft if they grabbed a receiver in round 1. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?